My name is Jon Reiner. I'm one of the pastors here, one of the teaching pastors, not Shane. I'm the other guy. And I'm just going to say it now, I'm in a good mood, right? And that's something we should just observe every once in a while, right? Because that's not always the norm, and I think we can be okay to say that. We're not always in a good mood, so when you are, let's just say it. I'm in a good mood. I'm feeling happy. Today is my wedding anniversary. I just said it. Stop. But seriously, though. Yeah, 12 big ones. I'm just in a good mood. And so if you've been with us, we've been going through a series in the book of Philippians. If you're not familiar with Philippians, it's a book in the Bible, the second half of the Bible. It's actually a letter. It was a letter written by a guy named Paul. Paul, the Apostle Paul, St. Paul, maybe you know him as that. And he planted this church in the city of this region called Philippi. But now he's sitting in a jail cell in Rome. Like Rome, the Roman Empire, Rome. He's sitting in a jail cell in Rome, and he's writing back to this church in Philippi, hence the Philippians. And he's trying to encourage them. He's trying to give them hope. He's trying to help with issues that are happening in their church. He's trying to speak joy, and that's what we've been going over for the last several weeks. It's just this message from Paul to one of his churches, and he sees himself as almost like this father figure to this church, and he wants to see them succeed. And we're going to look at 6 verses today, Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 through 18. And these are really just verses of encouragement. It's to speak into the heart of some of these early church believers who are just becoming discouraged. They're seeing things happen in their world around them. They're feeling pressure from the outside. They see themselves almost starting to divide within the church. And it's really just this word of encouragement. And so that is really the basis of what I want to try to communicate even to us today is some sort of word of encouragement for anyone. And I know there are those of us in the room, anyone who just feels discouraged. I just feel discouraged. And maybe it's life issues, it's the world that's happening around us, it's culture, it's all the opinions and perspectives and input, it's all the questions and the doubts and the uncertainties and the distrust, it's maybe personal, it's something happening in your life, it's finances, it's relationships, it's why am I in this city, why did I move here, why am I in this job, why did I leave my job, what is going on in my life? And it can almost then become spiritual, this sense of like, man, I've been at this Christian thing for a month, 2 months, 6 months, 3 years, 10 years, and I'm not really sure anything is happening. I don't think anything is changing. I don't think really anything is different about my life. This message is for that heart, to speak a simple word of encouragement as we look into the book of Philippians. If some people like knowing where we're going ahead of time, let me just give you kind of the table of contents. This is where we're going this morning. We're going to talk about stars, and then we're going to talk about socks, and then we're going to talk about the word therefore, and then we're going to talk about clay, and then we're going to ask the question, is God done with me? So, with that said, before we dive into Philippians, let's talk about the stars. The stars. Just trust me. If you know by now, you can trust me. This is going to make sense, hopefully. The stars. See, in our world today, we think of the stars differently than the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans and the Egyptians and Pacific Islanders and other indigenous cultures. They looked at the stars differently than us. We look at the stars from this scientific perspective, right? We see stars as these gravitationally contained astronomical spheres of burning gas and plasma. It's real sexy. We observe them, we study them, we chart them, but that hasn't always been the case. Stars used to be seen differently. Before there were street lights and traffic lights and skyscrapers and 24-hour shopping centers when people could look up at the stars, they looked at them differently. See, stars used to be compasses. They used to be guides. They used to be lights. They used to be the luminaries of the sky, and they used to be the canvas of heroes. Let me explain. Let's look at some stars. How many of you have ever heard of Hercules? Yes, Hercules. Are you talking about Greek mythology in my church? Sure am. Hercules. Hercules is one of the most popular figures from Greek mythology. He was a son of Zeus and the son of a mortal woman. He had the strength of the gods, but the appearance of a man. He defeated monsters. He protected cities. He traveled in and out of the underworld. And because of his greatness, follow me, because of his legacy, he was forever immortalized here in the Hercules constellation, in the sky, in the stars, so that others could remember him in his life, in his legacy. When they looked up to the sky, they would see forever a shining example in Hercules. Or maybe Perseus, another son of Zeus and a mortal woman. He's best known for his defeat of Medusa, this strikingly beautiful woman, right? But had dreadlocks made of snakes and would turn you into stone if she looked at you. She was a lovely lass. Perseus was immortalized here in the stars, in the Perseus constellation, in the sky, forever to be remembered, his life, his legacy, so that others in looking at him would have some sort of compass to remember and follow. Or maybe Orion, the famous hunter, claimed he could kill every beast on planet Earth, and yet some believe he was, mistakenly and unfortunately killed by a goddess with a bow and arrow. Nonetheless, he was immortalized up there on the western side, obviously sporting his beautiful accessory of Orion's belt. In the sky, in the stars, to serve as a guide and a compass. These are only a few examples, right, of these Greek and Romans. Other cultures had their own names and other stories and other legends that they looked up to the sky and they saw. The point was this: if you lived a life of greatness, a life worth remembering, a legacy worth preserving, if you're following me, then you might just find yourself immortalized in the sky with the heroes of the past, who would shine down and help others on their own journey. Stars were not just spheres of gas and plasma. They were shining examples of greatness. It's important to know that when we look at the book of Philippians, because the book of Philippians wasn't written to a 21st century audience who understood stars as burning gas and plasma. They saw the stars as compasses, as lights, as the canvas of heroes. They saw Hercules and Perseus and Orion and the legends of the past. And so with that said, let's look at Philippians chapter 2, verse 12 to 18. I will read, pray, and then we'll just start dissecting these verses. Paul writes this: "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I," Paul says, "will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor, I did not work in vain. But even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and I rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me." Let's pray. God, I thank you for who you are. I thank you for your word. I thank you that 2,000 years later, this message to the Philippians can be just as relevant to us. And so I pray specifically, God, for the hearts that feel discouraged, for the families that feel discouraged, for the marriages that feel discouraged, for even just pockets of a church that feel discouraged. I pray that through these 6 verses that you would speak just a right now word of life and encouragement and joy. Let us leave here today feeling uplifted, feeling encouraged, feeling inspired. God, would you speak life into the hearts that need it the most? In your name, amen. So what we're going to do is simply go through these 6 verses, try to get as much as we possibly can from each one, and then hopefully land somewhere that makes sense. So verse 12, Paul begins, "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed not only in my presence, when he was actually with them starting the church, but now much more in my absence, now that he's in a jail cell, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. First things first, a little mini Bible study lesson for anyone who may need it. If you're taking notes, write this down because this will change your world. Anytime you're reading the Bible and you see the word therefore, stop and ask yourself this question. What is the therefore? Therefore. Anytime you're reading the Bible and you see the word therefore, ask yourself the question, what is the therefore, therefore? Let me explain. We've talked about stars, let's talk about socks. I don't know about you, but one of the most practical daily feelings of just pure liberation and freedom that I have, I'm not being dramatic, is when I go home after a long day, you take off your shoes, you have socks on, you sit down, and there has to be like a rug or carpet, right? Can't just work on hardwoods or laminate. It has to be a rug or carpet. And you apply just enough pressure on your foot that you can just slide your foot right out of your sock. Has anyone ever done this? Thank you. Yeah. You just slide your foot right out, and I don't know what it is. It's just pure exhilaration. It's this just defiance against the structure of clothing where you're just like, nope, forget this. Slide it out. Oh, okay. Maybe you can't relate to the creepy slide out thing. What about this? Can anyone say that you or someone in your house, right, has the habit of randomly taking off their socks and leaving them places? Okay. Oh, there's a lot of thumbs going on, right? Okay, why, like, of all clothing items, it's the sock. It's the sock. And then we ask the question, why am I missing socks? Well, because we randomly take them off weird places. So you can all somewhat relate to this idea of the sock, but if you've never tried the slip thing, oh, please, just do it. Okay, so what you need to know for this example to make sense is that my wife, Emily, who I love and married to 12 years today, finds the fact that I slip my foot out of a sock pretty repulsive. She thinks it's just gross, like it's disgusting. What's disgusting about, you're not disgusted with me putting on the sock. Why are you disgusted with me taking it off? She thinks it's disgusting, right? And so let's just imagine, stay with me here, let's just imagine that my wife comes to me one day and says this, John, as you know, I find the fact that you slide your foot out of your sock repulsive. I also can't stand the fact that you leave your socks laying around for me to pick up. It's one of my few imperfections, but it's there. I would much rather, she says, have a dirty sock-free house. Therefore, I am putting a laundry basket on your side of the closet. Now, if I only hear her say, therefore, I am putting a laundry basket on your side of the closet, I'm going to miss something, aren't I? I'm going to miss something. If I don't know what she said before the therefore, I don't really know why she's doing that. I don't know what she's trying to communicate, and I certainly don't know that she thinks it's creepy that I just take my foot out of my sock. If I don't understand what happened before the therefore, I'm going to miss something. Does that make sense? So if you're reading the Bible and you see therefore, ask yourself, what is the therefore? This is what you have to do. Ask that question and go back to the immediate section prior to that word, because it's probably going to tell you what the therefore is there for. So follow me in this. Let us, before we dive into verse 12, go back to what Shane covered last week in Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, because it might give us a little insight into what our therefore is there for. I'm just having fun. Okay, verse 1. This is what Shane covered last week from Paul. It starts off this way. Therefore. That's what I'm saying. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, right? If you have any encouragement from your life with the Lord, if you have any encouragement from your relationship with the Lord, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort in your life has come from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy, Paul is saying, complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. He keeps going. Not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, Paul says, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place, gave him the name that's above every name, that the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So we started to ask, what is the therefore for verses 12 to 18? So we went to verses 1 through 11. How did verses 1 to 11 start? Therefore, which means we didn't go back far enough. Honestly, write this down. This is Bible Study 101, okay? So I'm not just killing time. There's a point to this. So let's go back to the section even before Shane's. If we're going to understand what Paul is saying in verses 12 to 18, we have to understand and dig deep to understand the therefore. And this is what Paul says in verse 27. Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Paul goes on to say, that way, whether I come to see you or hear about you in my absence, I'll know that you're standing firm in one spirit, striving together as one for the faith of the gospel, so on and so forth. Our therefore was linked to Shane's therefore, which brings us all the way back to Philippians 1, verse 27. Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. What is the therefore? So we can know how to conduct ourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. It's almost as if Paul is saying, live a life worthy of the gospel, therefore do these things. If we were to pull back from what Shane talked about last week, live a life worthy of the gospel, therefore choose love. In order to live a life worthy of the gospel, therefore choose unity. Live a life worthy of the gospel, therefore consider others greater than yourselves. And now in verse 12, that list just keeps going. So what we're looking at is how to live a life worthy of the gospel. He writes this in verse 12, therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but not much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation. Stop right there. A lot of people in faith have become discouraged and frustrated at times because of those words, work out your salvation. Because some people have read them, interpreted them, heard them, have been taught to them, that to work out your salvation somehow means to work it up, to prove it, to earn it. Work out your salvation, you have to work and earn this thing that has been given to you. You need to do more. You're not doing enough. You need to be better. You're not good enough. You need to pray more or read more or serve more or think better or speak better or stop swearing and smoking and drinking. You have to do all these things to earn your salvation. But that's not the point here. When Paul says work out your salvation, he's actually saying put it into practice. Do something with this. Don't let the fact that you call yourself a Christian just be a box that you checked on a survey. Do something with it. And this becomes very practical in our daily lives if we will let it. It means that when we open up the Bible and read a verse or a chapter, and we read it and we somehow, to the best of our ability, try to apply it to our life, little by little, you're working out your salvation. You're putting it into practice. You're doing something with it. Or if you listen to a sermon or you listen to a podcast, you listen to a teaching, and you try to apply it, little by little, you're working out your salvation. Anytime we intentionally pray throughout the week, this is the Monday through Saturday life, right? Anytime we do that, we are working out our salvation. You put your salvation into practice in your life, in your marriage, at your job, with your family. Why? So that you can live a life worthy of the gospel. The therefores, therefore. We try to say it a lot here at First Free. The only reason that I'm made right before God, the only reason that I have salvation is because of his life, death, and resurrection. That's it. I can't add to that. I can't take away from that. And I certainly can't earn it. It is not me earning something. It's more like Christ lived his life, became human, died on the cross, was resurrected, and then calls me something different. Like he puts a high calling on my life. He says, you were worth this. This was a value on you. This is who you are. You are completely made right before me. Now live that way. The opposite is maybe if I live well enough, then God will look at me and I will have value. It's the opposite in the kingdom of God. It's the opposite of the Christian story. Instead, it is I died on that cross. I spoke value in you. Now live that out. This is who you are. Put it into practice. You're not earning it. You're just living it. Little by little by little by little, day by day by day. So that I can live a life worthy of the gospel. He says, work out your salvation, and then he says, with fear and trembling. Again, another verse that I think is often misunderstood on one end of a spectrum or the other. For some, this verse, these words mean that you should forever be petrified. Be terrified, full fear and trembling, shaking of the idea of God. You should have this constant weight of fear on you all the times, because even though you are trying to work out your salvation, even though it seems, even in the wording of that it's a process, you better be perfect in doing it. And if you're not, you should be very afraid. Because maybe God is just waiting, right? God is just waiting to smite you. A beautiful word that we don't use enough. God is just waiting to just rain down judgment on you. God is just waiting to just wreck your life, right? As soon as you do one thing wrong or say one thing wrong or do one thing wrong or have one wrong argument, do one thing out of line, then I'm just going to mess with your job. And I'm just going to mess with your marriage. And I'm just going to kick over your finances. And I'm just going to tear your life apart. If you just do one thing, you better be ready for it. And for some people, that is their perspective of God. So with fear and trembling is this actual just constant sense of being terrified. But on the other side of the spectrum, where I think we get it wrong, is that we just completely disregard it, right? And we water it down and we weaken it. Almost to the sense to say, look, no, it's just really more like a gentle respect of God. Ultimately, God just wants us to think he's cool. I don't think he's having that identity complex. I don't think God is truly worried about whether John thinks he's cool. I'm not sure he's having that moment. I wonder if it's actually somewhere in the middle, and follow me here. I love how one scholar puts it. I'm going to read it, then I'll translate it. It says this: the fear and trembling of working our salvation is the anxiety of one who distrusts his ability completely to meet all requirements, but religiously does his utmost to fulfill his duty. I'll read that again. The anxiety of one who distrusts his ability completely to meet all requirements and yet religiously does his utmost to fulfill his duty. What does that mean? It means that in the midst of us day by day by day by day, little by little by little by little, trying to work out our salvation, trying to put it in practice, it means I don't necessarily trust my own ability to do it. I don't actually trust my own ability to live a life worthy of the gospel perfectly. I don't trust my own ability to work out my salvation perfectly in every area of my life. I don't trust my own ability to always take out the Bible and read it every day. I don't trust my own ability to always read the Bible and then try to apply it. I don't trust my own ability to stay awake during a sermon. I don't trust my own ability to listen to a podcast or a teaching and automatically apply it. I don't trust my ability that I'm always going to respond well with people. I don't trust my ability that I'm always going to respond well to my spouse or my kids or my church or my pastor or my neighbors. I don't trust that I'm always going to do this in and of myself, by myself, perfectly, but because it still means so much to me. Because I still believe that he paid such a high price for me. Because I am so convinced at the truth of this gospel, because I'm so overwhelmed by the reality that he truly thinks that I have value and worth, because it means so much to me, I'm still going to give it everything that I have. I don't trust that on my own I will ever be enough, but I'm going to give it everything that I have anyways. And I choose to live in that tension. you are so much greater than me. You are so much holier than me. You are so much more powerful than me. You are so much better than me. And your death and your resurrection, your sacrifice that you did for me was such a high calling and a price I'll never be able to earn or repay, but I believe it and I receive it. I will do my best to live it out. It's almost as if Paul is saying this: if you don't think you can live out the perfect life, that's a good place to be. If you don't think you can live out a perfect life, that's a good place to be. Why? Well, it kind of keeps us humble, doesn't it? If I don't think I can live out this life perfectly, it keeps me humble. Because if I think I can live out this life perfectly, if I think I can do this, I do have it all together. I do respond perfectly. All my thoughts are true. All my opinions are correct. Everything I do say is gospel. Every relationship in my life is great. Every area of my life is fantastic. I can do this perfectly. Then all of a sudden, I start to look at all of you and say, why can't you? See what I'm saying? If I can do this perfectly, I look at everyone else and say, what's your problem? Well, why can't you be as perfect as I am? Why can't you have it as together as I do? You see, if I am in this place of saying I can't live out the perfect life, I think it's good because it keeps me humble. And it keeps me relying on God's grace every single day. I'm not trying to do it on my own. I'm not just trying to think that everything I think, my opinion, my conscience, my thoughts, my opinion, my perspective, all those are correct. Everything I do is just going to be gold. Instead, I'm like, man, your standard is so great. I'm not going to be able to do it perfectly, but I'm going to give it everything I have, little by little by little, day by day by day. You see, what if I realize I can't do it perfectly? And if I realize I can't do it perfectly, then maybe I realize you can't do it perfectly. Boom. Boom. And if I realize that I can't do it perfectly and I need God's grace, then maybe I come to realize that you can't do it perfectly and maybe you need God's grace. You see? And maybe others are needing to rely on God's grace too. And maybe if I don't trust my own ability to live out life perfectly and I need to rely on God's grace and I need to be humble, then maybe I'll learn how to consider others better than myself. What he says in verses 1 through 11. Maybe I'll understand that maybe not everything I say or think, my opinion, my perspective, everything about me is absolutely true. And if I don't always get it right, and I need to be humble, and I need to have grace, then maybe that just allows enough room for me to look at things from your perspective and your view and your opinion and your life and think to myself, man, maybe that's how I consider someone better than myself. Do we get it? Yeah, maybe the fear and trembling part, that self-realization, that self-inspection actually guides us to unity with others rather than pulling us apart. Because if we're all convinced that we can live life perfectly and we're all looking at everyone else, why can't you live life perfectly? Then we will always collide because we'll never always agree on everything. But if we can all say, I may not have it all together, I need humility, I need grace, maybe you need grace, then maybe what actually unites us is our shared imperfections. It is our humility. It is our grace that makes us alike. So maybe what Paul's saying, it is not such a bad place to be in if we say I can't live out this life perfectly. Continue to work out your faith with fear and trembling. Why? Therefore. So I can live a life worthy of the gospel. He goes on in verse 13 to say this. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. So let's recap so far. Live a life worthy of the gospel, therefore, actually put your faith into practice. Never fully trusting your own ability to do it perfectly, keeping you humble, relying on grace. Why? Because ultimately, verse 13 says, it's actually God who's working in you. It is God who is developing your life. It's not you. it's God. It's actually God working in you to will and to act. We've talked about stars. We've talked about socks. We talked about therefore. We talk about clay. Okay, the Old Testament writers would sometimes use this metaphor for God where they would liken him to a potter and people, Israel, as clay. So the idea is this: if you've ever seen a potter at a potter's wheel, right, it's an incredible thing to watch. And so the potter takes this clay, just this lump of wet, raw, shapeless, formless, lacking any sort of real purpose, just clump of clay, and puts it on this pottery wheel and begins to spin it. Spin it. And this master potter just knows exactly how to handle it. They have to have their hands just not too wet, not too dry. And then all of a sudden the potter just starts pressing on it, right? And poking at it and digging in it and squeezing it and pressing it, right? And they have to keep this ongoing balance and rhythm, almost like a dance with the clay. Little by little by little, the potter begins to press and push and create, and the clay responds to the movements of the potter's hands. And with that, the image in mind, you see from the very beginning when that potter puts that piece of clay on the pottery wheel, it just looks like a clump of raw, worthless, formless, lacking purpose clay. But in the head of the potter, he already knows what he wants to bring out of that clump of clay. It's like he already sees the plate, he already sees the bowl, he already sees the vase, he already sees the jug, he already sees the ashtray. He already sees what it is that he's going to make out of that clay. And so as it's spinning, he still sees it. He still sees what he wants to bring out of it. And little by little by little, he starts pressing it and forming it to take the shape of exactly what it is he wants that thing to look like. And slowly but surely, the clay begins to take the form of that bowl or vase or jar or jug or whatever it is. It begins to take its form. Is the clay involved? Yes, obviously the clay is involved, but ultimately, right, the writers of the Old Testament would say ultimately it is the potter working in and through the clay to bring about something that is exquisite. Is the clay involved? Yes. But the clay doesn't always have the same perspective as the potter. Now, if this clay actually had consciousness and the ability to think, let's just imagine, what is the clay thinking during this process? What's the clay's perspective? Just spinning. Just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. The clay's probably just trying to hope to stay on the table. The clay has no idea that there's a plate or a jug or a pot in mind. The clay's clay. And it just sees its world spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And I wonder, just maybe if we took the clay out and inserted ourselves, if we could relate a little bit more to a clump of clay than anything else. I look at my world and I just see things spinning and spinning and spinning. I see areas of my life just spinning. I'm a student. I don't know what college is going to look like. I don't know how I'm going to finish my degree. I don't know what my program is going to look like. My world is just spinning. I don't know why I moved to this city. There's no one here. I have no family. I have no friends. Why in the world did I come to this city? Why did I take that job? Why did I leave that job? How am I supposed to make my family work? Why does our marriage just seem like it's one fight after another, over and over and over and over and over again? What are these little mutants that I created called kids? How am I supposed to talk to them? How am I supposed to get along with them? Why won't they listen to me? Why don't they think I'm cool? What happened to my finances? What happened to my job? What happened to the news? What's going on in my world? What's going on in my culture? What's going on with my church? What's going on? And I wonder if we think a little bit like that clay. Sometimes things just seem like they're spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. If the clay was simply left to itself, right, it would just kind of fall off the table. If you've never seen that, you should YouTube some pottery wheel fails. It's pretty funny. Ultimately, it is the potter working in and through the clay to bring about something exquisite. Paul says, live a life worthy of the gospel, therefore work out your salvation, put it into practice, allow it to take form in your life, never trust your own ability to do it on your own, because ultimately it is God who is working in you. It's the potter. That doesn't mean that God is always bringing everything in your life that's happening. He's making everything happen, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It just simply says in Scripture that God works all things out for good. It means that no matter how much that clay starts to shift and go off course, his hands are still molding something little by little by little by little, forming something, fashioning something, creating the thing in his head that he already sees in you. If the clay was left to itself, it wouldn't amount to much. It would never take its true form. It would never become what it could. It would flop back and forth and ultimately fall off the table. But in the hands of the master potter, that clay takes form. That clay moves to the rhythm and the dance of the potter until it finally takes its shape. It is God who works in you, and God is not giving up on you. And that is something that just hit me so strong that some of us need to hear. God is not giving up on you. You might see your life as just a worthless clump of raw clay that is spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And maybe it's been spinning for weeks or months or years, and it just seems like nothing is getting better. You come to these services, I listen to these sermons, they're like 50 minutes long. I go home, I try to read my Bible, I try to do everything I can, but it doesn't seem like anything is changing in my life. I truly just feel like the picture we need to walk away with is that potter's hand on the clay that little by little by little by little pushes here, little presses there, little adjustments here and there, that there is something beautiful being made. And that even if our perspective is spinning, God isn't giving up on the masterpiece that he is creating in and through your life and in and through this church and in and through his church at large. He's not giving up on it no matter how much the world seems like it's spinning. He is still crafting something beautiful, and let that be a word of encouragement in your life. He is not done with you. Don't be done with him. He is still crafting something. Philippians 1:6, if you remember, says this: being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it out to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. He isn't giving up on you. Little by little by little by little by little, day by day by day. Every sermon that you hear, every podcast, every teaching that you listen to, and you just try the best you can to apply something. Little by little by little. Every time you open up your word and you read a verse or a chapter or 40 chapters or whatever it is, little by little, he's fashioning you and forming you. Every time you spend word in prayer, every song of worship that you sing and you allow to change your perspective, every temptation or addiction in your life that you choose to fight against, no matter how long it might take, every conversation that you have with your spouse, every time that you choose to spend with your kids, little by little by little by little by little, God is fashioning and forming you into something. He is working on the clay of your life, and it is God who is working in and through you. It's not just you. Yeah, you're involved. You're involved. The clay is involved. But it's God ultimately who's doing it. It says to will and to act. What does that mean? Well, will is like our decisions, act is our action. So it's almost as if God isn't only shaping our behaviors so we behave better, to fit some socially accepted characteristic of what a Christian looks like in our behaviors. He's actually getting to the root cause of our decisions. The decisions are very much shape who we are. It's what we choose. It's our perspectives. It's our opinions. It's what we do in the decisions that we make. He wants to get to the very root of who we are and why we do what we do. He's not giving up on you little by little by little, day by day by day. And then Paul says it's for his good pleasure. It's all to fulfill his good pleasure. Linguistically, that's also understood as good purpose or good pleasure. Like the potter has a picture in his mind when they begin to work on that clay. They know what they are creating, even though the clay doesn't see it. God knows the good purposes he has for you, even though it might seem like you're in some dead-end, worthless, purposeless job, going through life, just taking classes. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with my life right now. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I moved. I don't know why I'm moving away. I don't know my marriage is going to look like. I don't know why I don't know. It might seem like it's spinning, but little by little by little, God is crafting something through the experiences of our life. And not only is it for his good purpose that he has for you, but please hear this, he actually has pleasure in doing it. In other words, for God's good pleasure means God actually likes working on you. He actually enjoys working on you. The little by little, day by day adjustments that we make in our life, God actually likes it. God likes working on your anger. Let that hit. God likes working through the areas of selfishness in your life. God likes working through the areas of greed or lust or temptations or our relationships. God likes working on us. It actually brings him pleasure. He loves us in the process of forming us. He enjoys it. He actually enjoys making you into a life worthy of the gospel little by little. Don't give up and don't be discouraged. Because we don't always see that perfect specimen when we look in the mirror. We see our struggles and we see our doubts and we see our uncertainties and we see our questions that we're afraid to ask and we see the arguments that we have with people and we see just the bitterness and the negativity that we look at others with. We see the anger and the fights. We see the fill in the blank, but God still sees the work that he will be faithful to complete in your life. Please let that encourage your heart. God is still working, and he'll be faithful. And little by little, something is changing. Don't be done with him because he is not done with you. He goes on in verse 14 to say this: do everything without grumbling or arguing. That deserves a drink break. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. Linguistically, you can actually flip those words. You can swap them for complaining and fighting. Do everything without complaining and fighting. That's not easy to hear, is it? Especially now. It doesn't seem easy to hear. Or if we're being honest and transparent, it's just not easy for us to hear. It should be easy for someone else to hear. But it's not easy for us to hear. Do everything without complaining or fighting. Now we know that there is actually something happening in the church of Philippi. We don't know what it is though. So Paul is writing this letter and he's saying, hey, do everything without grumbling or arguing. We know that there's actually a real situation happening in this church. There is something that they're complaining about. There is some issue that they're fighting about. We don't know what it is, but we know that he's addressing a real life situation. It seems like this young church of young believers surrounded by a culture of non-believers are starting to feel this pressure from the outside. Some issues, life is happening, culture is happening, society is happening, right? Things are happening around them and they're starting to feel squeezed. And this young church, especially these early churches that were part of the Roman Empire, they were fairly diverse at times because you have people coming in from all areas. And so you have these diverse audiences, this diverse young group of believers who have different perspectives and have different opinions and they have different ideas and they have different questions and they have different priorities. And all of a sudden this pressure and the differences within them are starting to squeeze them to the point where now they're starting to just grumble against each other. They're starting to complain against each other. They're starting to let those grumblings and complainings turn into arguments and fights and on the brink of dividing. And Paul is trying to speak into the midst of this young church and stop this division that's happening. But as the biblical authors so beautifully do at times, what they write is usually not just all that there is to it. Sometimes there's more under the surface. And don't we love digging? We love digging. We love digging. And so even though he's talking about a specific situation, Paul is directly referencing things that happened in the book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus and the people of Israel. So follow me here. You can go back and read these chapters on your own, but it will be Exodus 16 and Exodus 32. In these two statements, he is pointing out the errors of their spiritual forefathers. Okay, first, Exodus 16, grumbling and arguing. Okay. In Exodus 16, God had just delivered the people of Israel from their slavery and bondage in Egypt. even if you didn't grow up in the church, you've probably heard these stories. You've probably read it, right? Or you've probably seen movies about it or heard about it, right? Like these incredible plagues of Egypt where God puts his full power like on display. We're talking about like hail and frogs and locusts and darkness and water turning to blood. Like he is sparing no expense. God is showing his full display of power for at that time the world's largest known empire to see, and forcing the most powerful known figure in the world at that time to let go of a large portion of his forced labor. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people being brought out of slavery and bondage and being promised that the same God that was on display, the same God that was powerful, the same God that worked miracles, the same God that came through, the same God that provided, the same God that was just like so incredibly powerful in that moment would bring them to a land they could live on, and a land that they could toil, and a land that they could produce more people, and a land that could sustain them, a land of vegetation, a land of water, a land that was just promising. And these people didn't just read about it in a book. They didn't watch a movie about it. They lived through it. They saw these plagues. They saw God's deliverance. They saw the miracles. They were amazed by what he did. And yet in Exodus chapter 13, this same group, in the process from being taken from their old life, a life of death and confusion and chaos and slavery and bondage, and in the midst of being brought to a place of promise in life, while they're in their journey, this group of people start complaining. Actually, the word in Exodus 16 that's used over and over again is grumbling. They start grumbling. They start grumbling. They start grumbling against God. They start grumbling against God's leadership. They are no longer trusting God's methods. They're no longer getting what they think they want. They want different food. It was what their issue. They wanted food. They wanted different food to eat. Like the God who brought them out miraculously of slavery and bondage, they are now complaining and grumbling against because of what they want to eat. It's like they completely forgot how God brought them out of Egypt, how he miraculously put his power on display, what he was capable of, and they only saw what they wanted and they didn't have. Don't fly over this. They saw what they wanted and they didn't have. Church, when what we want becomes more important than who we need, we find ourselves in trouble. What we want can quickly become more important than who we need. For the people of Israel, they were talking about food. In our day, we talk about other things. We talk about other things that we want. Sometimes it's opinions and perspectives. We see that a lot right now in full display. It's points of view. It's needing to be right. It's needing to win an argument, whether it's with our spouse or our kids or the internet. It's needing to be right, to be powerful. To maybe it's money. It's a particular political party or politician. It's the craving. It's the lust. It's positions. It's power. It's prestige. It's the thing that we want. It can become a number of different things, but what we want can quickly become more important than who we need. And in Exodus 16, God says the people of Israel began grumbling against God. They began grumbling against God's leadership. They began grumbling against God's methods. I don't trust the way that you're forming me on this wheel. They start to distrust the leadership that God put into place. And Paul is reminding the church of Philippians of the mistakes of their spiritual forefathers. In Exodus 16, God actually responds to them. And he provides food. Like he actually does it. It says over and over again, I've heard their grumbling, I've heard their grumbling, I've heard their complaining, I've heard their complaining, they're whining. It's like us parents. I've heard their whining, I've heard their whining, I've heard their complaining, I've heard their complaining. And so God actually brings about food. He provides different food for them. And they miraculously have fresh food every single day. He simply gives them one guideline. Just take only what you need for today. He came through and brought the thing that they wanted, that they were complaining and grumbling about. They got it. And yet, even when he put that one restriction, like just only take what you need for the day, some of them couldn't even handle that. I want more. I want more. This isn't enough. I want more. And so they would start to stockpile things, right? They would start to stockpile for multiple days. And the next day it would just be full of maggots because God's like, no, y'all listen to me. Even in the midst of being delivered powerfully out of Egypt, this group of people forgot how much God had already done for them. Starts complaining, starts grumbling, starts dividing amongst themselves, starts fighting, because there's always something more that we want. He says this, do everything without grumbling or arguing so that you may become blameless and pure. He actually describes a church that isn't complaining and fighting as a pure and blameless church. That's not a bad description. He said, you may become blameless and pure children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Real quick, let's go to Exodus chapter 32. You don't have to read through it. Exodus chapter 32 and a warped and crooked generation. In Exodus 32, the people of Israel are waiting on the side of this mountain. The leader of the people of Israel, his name is Moses, he takes a hike. He hikes up a mountain to pray and worship God, and while he's gone, the people start complaining again. And they start grumbling again, and they start arguing, and they start fighting, they start dividing amongst themselves. They actually say that they just wish they could go back to their old life. This isn't working. It was better then. It was better in slavery. Can I just go back there? You see, in the process, they lost sight of who God was, what he'd already done for them, how capable he is, and rather than trusting the potter at the wheel, they simply say, can I just go back to what I know? Can I just go back to what I was used to? They don't trust God's methods or his leadership, and so instead they want something else to worship. Listen to this, church. When what we want becomes more important than who we need, then we'll often find something else to worship. When what we want becomes more important than who we need, then we'll often find something else to worship. And more often than not, it's the thing we wanted that we start to worship more than anything else. People of Israel weren't satisfied with God's leadership. They didn't trust his methods or his miracles. And so they crafted something else. They create this golden image to worship. And God describes them as a warped and crooked generation. Fast forward to Paul. They'd been warped by their wants, destroyed by their complaining, divided by their arguments and their fighting, losing sight of who God is in the process. Paul is warning the church in Philippi, don't give in to the complaining and the fighting and the arguing and the dividing. If you want to live a life worthy of the gospel of Christ, figure out your stuff. I think this is just as much for us. Do everything without complaining about what you want, without arguing against each other, without fighting and dividing, so that you may be blameless and pure children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Okay, let's recap before we get to our final thing. Live a life worthy of the gospel of Christ, therefore. Put your faith into practice. Actually live it out. Don't trust your own ability to live life perfectly. Stay humble. Fall upon grace for yourself and others. Know that God is working on you and in you little by little, day by day, creating you into something beautiful, even through the experiences of our life. Know that God actually enjoys working on you in the process. He loves changing you into what he has in mind for you to do. Do everything without complaining or fighting, and then, here it is in verse 15, and then you will shine among them like stars. We found our way back. You will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of God. Paul is not saying that you will shine like burning balls of gas somewhere in the galaxy. This isn't a 21st century audience. You will shine like the heroes of the past. You will shine like the compasses and the luminaries. You will shine like the guides in the dark night sky. You will shine like the legends and the myths and the heroes of old. You will be remembered individually, your church, your life, as an example for others to see and follow as you hold firmly to the word of life and live a life worthy of the gospel. You will shine like stars. That's the hope of Paul in this letter to the Philippians. That the church of Philippi, that every individual in it would actually live and believe and function in such a way that they become a compass for others. A story worth remembering and retelling, worth repeating, immortalized in the sky of history for all to say. And then Paul says, and then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not labor in vain. Like Paul's sitting in his jail cell and he doesn't know what's going to happen to him, whether he'll get out, stay in prison, be executed. He doesn't know. It's almost as if Paul is coming to this like mushy side of him that we don't often see. He's coming to this realization that his work has always been people. Not the number of churches he planted or how big they got or how many years he's been in ministry or whatever else. His job has been people. And Paul is hoping and believing that on the day of Christ, on the day of Christ's return, he can look and see the shining example of the church of the Philippians. It's that parent who sees their kid do something, whether it's big or small, and thinks, oh my goodness, you're the smartest kid on the planet. You're the strongest kid in the world. I'm applying to MIT now. Like oh my goodness, it's the coach who sees the athlete push through adversity and succeed on the field. And they're like, yes, that one's mine. That one was mine. Or the teacher who saw the kid who struggled and finally passes or succeeds or go off to college. And the teacher is like, yes, it was all worth it. For you? No, for them. They are shining like stars. They become an example, a compass, a light, a legend, and a hero in the sky. You did it. He finally says, even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you, so you too should be glad and rejoice. The drink offering was often this thing done on the side of the offering. It was done in Jewish sacrificial systems. It was done in pagan sacrificial systems. It was sometimes a glass of wine, sometimes strong drink, both mentioned in the Bible. And all of a sudden, it would be either poured on the sacrifice or off to the side of it. Sometimes the idea was this like strong aroma that would come up. For others, it's just another thing that I'm giving up, another sacrifice, another offering. And I wonder if what Paul is saying is, even if I'm just a side note to your faith, even if I'm just a side note, even if I'm just being poured out for your sake, I'm happy and I rejoice. Because the therefore of the therefore of the therefore was that you would live a life worthy of the gospel of Christ. And that even in the midst of a world and a life that seems like it's spinning, that you would never forget that the potter is still forming you and fashioning you. That to live a life worthy of the gospel of Christ, that you would choose humility and choose love and choose grace and choose each other and choose being united. That you would work out your salvation, put it into practice little by little by little, day by day by day. Even if you don't see huge things happening, know that the potter is still fashioning you and forming you in all areas of your life. And he's never going to give up on you, because he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. And even if it doesn't seem like it's making sense in the situations of our life, there's still a potter who is fashioning you and forming you and still sees something incredible in you, and he is not giving up. And so even in the midst of your discouragement, may you be encouraged to know that he loves working on us in the process, and there is something, a land of promise that he's bringing us to. There is a completed work that he is fashioning, and he will never give up on that process. So never give up on him. May you shine like stars. May your life and your marriage and your family and your faith be the legends of old. I remember that one. Would you stand? As we finish, I simply want to pray for anyone whose heart just feels discouraged. And then I'll get you out of here. God, I thank you for your word. And I specifically pray for any heart who is just discouraged and feels like they are that clump of clay spinning out of control. Jobs and finances and family and marriages and kids, culture, and school, and unknowns and questions and uncertainties and distrusts. And issues that seem larger than us, and it just seems like there's nothing happening. There's no difference being made in my life. God, would you speak a right now word of encouragement by your Spirit to their hearts? Would you let them know a sense of joy and peace that you are not finished working on their heart, that you little by little by little, day by day, are crafting them and forming them into something. The process matters. The process matters, and the daily response to your pushes and presses and being in the Word and being in prayer and being connected in unity with one another as a church matters. That you hope, just as Paul hoped, that they might shine like stars, and that the work that you started in them, you will be faithful to complete. God, would you speak encouragement to the hearts who need it the most? And may all of us leave here knowing that in process, you have pleasure. You have a good purpose. And that every single day, you are crafting us into something beautiful that will shine like the stars. In your name, amen. Have a great day, y'all.